Alright, so let's start from the very beginning here. Because when we're talking about Rango, we're not just talking about some random animated movie. We're talking about a genuine masterpiece that hit theaters back in 2011 and still holds up to this day as one of the most original and gutsy animated films ever made. The basic premise sounds absolutely insane when you hear it out loud, but honestly, that's exactly what makes it so damn charming. We've got a chameleon who's spent his entire life inside a terrarium, completely cut off from the outside world, passing the time by putting on little theatrical performances with his inanimate roommates, a dead bug, a wind-up fish, and the torso of a Barbie doll. Doesn't exactly scream typical Disney material, right? And that was entirely the point. The filmmakers set out to create something that stood apart from anything the animation genre had ever produced. The story kicks off with our nameless hero. Yeah, he doesn't even have a proper name at the start, which is already a pretty existential statement if you think about it. Getting launched out of his cozy glass box after a freak accident and landing smack in the middle of the Mojave Desert. Just picture that for a second. You've lived your whole life in this tiny bubble, having conversations with objects that can't talk back, and suddenly you're out there, dropped into a world that's as brutal and unforgiving as the American desert gets. This isn't just a change of scenery, it's a complete paradigm shift for this little lizard. From the climate-controlled safety of a terrarium, straight into scorching heat where death could be lurking behind every sand dune. And right here is where the real journey begins, both the physical one and the emotional one. What sets this film apart is how it takes classic Western tropes and drops them into a completely fresh context. You've got all the ingredients of a classic spaghetti Western, the mysterious stranger rolling into town, a community plagued by bandits and corrupt power players, the tough lady who needs a hand, the ice-cold villain, showdowns at sundown, but all of it gets filtered through a lens that's simultaneously a loving homage and a clever send-up. The filmmakers clearly did their homework, studying movies like The Good, The Bad, and the Ugly, Chinatown, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and those influences are woven throughout the film without it ever feeling like a mere copycat job. Our main character, the chameleon who eventually christens himself Rango, is one of the most compelling figures animation has ever given us. At his core, he's an actor without a stage, a performer without an audience, somebody so desperate for an identity that he's willing to completely reinvent himself from scratch. When he stumbles into the little western town of Dirt, yes, the town is literally called Dirt, which should tell you everything you need to know about what kind of rundown community we're dealing with. He improvises a brand new persona on the spot. He claims to be a feared gunslinger who once took out 7 outlaws with a single bullet, the Jenkins brothers. Obviously, it's all made up, a spontaneous bit of improv born from survival instinct and a desperate craving to be accepted. But what makes Rango truly fascinating is how layered he is as a character. On one hand, he's a complete coward who genuinely has no clue what he's doing. He can't shoot, he can't fight, and his only real skill is the art of deception and having a quick tongue. But on the other hand, over the course of the film, he displays real courage and genuine character growth. He learns that heroism isn't about being fearless, it's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. That's a remarkably mature message for an animated film, and it's delivered not with a sledgehammer but subtly, through the plot and character interactions. Johnny Depp voices Rango, and honestly, this might be one of his finest and most unconventional performances. Depp's known for playing eccentric characters, think Jack Sparrow or Edward Scissorhands, but here he takes it to another level entirely. His voice carries the whole movie, and he manages to make Rango sound simultaneously likable, funny, desperate, and ultimately heroic. It's a tightrope walk that he absolutely nails. What's really interesting is that the film wasn't produced the way most animated movies are, where actors record their lines solo in a sound booth. Instead, director Gore used a technique called emotion capture, where the actors performed their scenes together on an improvised stage, wearing costumes that reflected their characters. That's why the dialogue feels so natural and spontaneous, because it genuinely was. Beyond Rango himself, there's a whole roster of memorable characters populating this world. Take Beans, voiced by Isla Fisher. She's the female lead, a desert iguana and rancher fighting to save her family's farm from going under. She's anything but the typical damsel in distress you'd expect from a classic Western. Sure, she needs help, but she's also tough, sharp, and perfectly capable of standing up for herself. One of her signature quirks is that she freezes up during intense emotions or stressful moments. She goes completely rigid and motionless, almost like she's in a trance. It's not just a funny visual gag either. It's a clever nod to how certain reptiles actually play dead when threatened. Beans is a terrific character because she brings genuine emotional depth to the film and gives Rango a real reason to rise above himself. Then there's the Mayor of Dirt, an old tortoise in a wheelchair, voiced by Ned Beatty. The Mayor is one of those classic film noir villains who comes across as a kindly, fatherly type on the surface, but is actually the mastermind behind a massive conspiracy. He controls the town's water supply, and in a desert town, water equals power. The parallels to Chinatown are obvious and intentional, and Ned Beatty brings a quiet, menacing presence that elevates the entire film. The Mayor isn't just some cartoon bad guy who cackles maniacally and plots world domination. He's a businessman, a manipulator, someone who games the system for personal gain and has no problem stepping over bodies to get what he wants. That makes him a far more interesting and unsettling antagonist than your typical animated movie villain. Another unforgettable character is Rattlesnake Jake, who functions as the film's ultimate heavy, voiced by Bill Nighy. Jake is a rattlesnake with a gatling gun instead of his rattle. Yes, you heard that right. A machine gun for a tail. He's the physical embodiment of everything Rango pretends to be but isn't. A genuine killer, a feared gunslinger, someone who makes even the toughest characters shake in their boots. When Jake shows up on screen, the entire atmosphere of the film shifts. Things get very real and very dangerous, very fast. Bill Nighy delivers a vocal performance that's simultaneously terrifying and captivating. And Rattlesnake Jake is easily one of the greatest antagonists the animation genre has ever produced. What also makes this film extraordinary is its incredibly detailed and original visual style. Rango was produced by Industrial Light and Magic, the legendary special effects studio behind Star Wars and Jurassic Park. It was their first full-length animated feature, and they went all in. The character designs are deliberately unconventional. The animals don't look cute or appealing in the traditional sense. They've got warts, scars, missing teeth, and all sorts of other imperfections that make them feel incredibly real and alive. The desert landscape is breathtakingly detailed, every grain of sand seemingly rendered individually, and the lighting evokes classic Sergio Leone westerns. This isn't an animated film trying to be cute, it's trying to be art, and it succeeds brilliantly. The supporting characters deserve special recognition too, because they contribute enormously to the atmosphere and humor. There's Wounded Bird, a crow who starts out as what looks like a Native American stereotype, but reveals himself to be a much more nuanced character. There's Priscilla, a little eye girl with enormous eyes who's simultaneously one of the cutest and most unsettling figures in the film. There are the Jenkins brothers, a gang of ground squirrel bandits initially introduced as a threat, but who later become Rango's unlikely allies. Every single character, even the smallest supporting roles, feels fleshed out and real, as if each one has their own backstory and motivation. That's the hallmark of excellent world-building and character development. Particularly worth mentioning is the character of the Spirit of the West, who appears in one of the film's most memorable scenes. Without spoiling too much for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, it's an unmistakable reference to a real Hollywood legend who's never named outright, but whose identity is crystal clear. This scene serves as a moment of reflection and inspiration for Rango, a turning point in his hero's journey, and it doubles as a loving tribute to the Western genre and its icons. The fact that an animated children's film includes a scene like this shows just how ambitious and multi-layered Rango truly is. Now let's get to the heart of the film, the story and its theme. On the surface level, Rango is a classic fish-out-of-water tale, or should I say, a chameleon out of terrarium tale. An outsider arrives in a strange community, has to prove himself, and eventually becomes the hero. But beneath that simple surface lies a surprisingly complex meditation on identity, truth, and the nature of heroism. The central question the film keeps asking is, who are you? Rango gets hit with this question multiple times throughout the movie, and every time he struggles to come up with an answer. At the beginning, he has no identity, no name, no story. He's a blank slate, an empty canvas. When he arrives in dirt, he spontaneously invents a new identity, a lie that's bigger than he is. But over the course of the film, he has to learn that true identity isn't something you make up. It's something you create through your actions and choices. In the end, Rango doesn't become a hero because he pretends to be one. He becomes a hero because he chooses to act like one, even when he's scared out of his mind. The theme of identity also plays out on a broader societal level. Dirt is in crisis, not just because the water's running out, but because the town has lost its sense of self. The residents have stopped hoping, stopped fighting, stopped believing in anything. Rango's arrival and his obviously fabricated hero stories gives them something to hold on to, a reason to hope. Even if the story isn't true, the hope it generates is very real. That's a thought-provoking philosophical statement about the power of myths and the stories we tell ourselves. Another major theme is water, or more precisely, the lack of it. In a desert town, water is life, and whoever controls the water controls everything. This is an obvious metaphor for resources and power in general, and the film draws parallels to real-world issues like environmental destruction and corruption. The mayor, it turns out, has deliberately diverted the town's water supply to force residents to sell their land so he can develop it for his own purposes. It's a chillingly realistic portrayal of the abuse of power and greed, packaged inside an animated movie about talking animals. The plot unfolds like a classic Western mystery thriller. Rango arrives in town, gets appointed sheriff after accidentally killing a massive hawk, a scene that's brilliantly staged, by the way, and then has to solve the mystery of the disappearing water. There are chase sequences, shootouts, betrayals, and revelations, all packaged at a pace that never lets up. The story has enough twists to keep adult viewers engaged, but is never so convoluted that kids can't follow along. That's a tricky balancing act, and the film pulls it off masterfully. One of the most memorable sequences is the desert chase where Rango and his posse try to intercept a water convoy. This scene is a love letter to action cinema in general, and to films like Mad Max and Raiders of the Lost Ark in particular. The choreography is stunning. The use of music and sound effects is pitch perfect, and there's enough absurd humor to cut the tension without undermining it. You completely forget you're watching an animated film. The action feels real and dangerous, which is an enormous compliment to the animators and the director. The humor deserves its own spotlight too. Rango is funny, but in a very specific way. There aren't many of the typical kiddie movie jokes you'd expect from other animated films. No fart gags, no over-the-top slapstick routines. Instead, the humor tends toward the absurdist, sometimes even surreal. There are wordplay, cultural references that fly right over kids' heads, and a consistent undercurrent of dry, sarcastic wit. Rango himself is a natural comedian, always ready with a quick quip or an improvised fib, and Johnny Depp's comedic timing is flawless. But the film also knows when to get serious, and those moments are never undercut by misplaced humor. The musical score by Hans Zimmer is yet another reason Rango sticks with you. Zimmer, known for his work on films like The Dark Knight and Inception, delivers a score here that sounds simultaneously classic Western and completely original. There are echoes of Ennio Morricone's iconic music for Sergio Leone's films, but also electronic elements and unexpected turns that make the score uniquely its own. Especially noteworthy is the Mariachi Owl Band, a group of owls who function as a Greek chorus, commenting on the action. They sing about Rango's fate and prophesy his death, adding an extra layer of dark humor and self-aware irony to the whole experience. The production of Rango was unusual for an animated film in several ways. Director Gore Verbinski, known for the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, insisted that the actors perform their scenes together rather than recording in isolated sound booths. This emotion capture approach meant the actors didn't just voice their characters, they physically embodied them. They wore costumes, interacted with improvised props, and played out their scenes in a specially designed studio. The animators then used footage from these performances as reference material to shape the character's movements and expressions. The result is animation that feels more alive and natural than what you get from most other animated films. The screenplay was written by John Logan, an Oscar-nominated writer known for his work on Gladiator and Hugo. Logan is clearly a massive fan of the Western genre, and his script is loaded with references and nods that genre aficionados will eat up. But he also understands that a good screenplay needs more than just clever references. It needs believable characters, a gripping story, and dialogue that sounds organic. Rango delivers all of that in spades. The dialogue is sharp and witty, the character arcs are convincing, and the story has enough depth to reward repeat viewings. One aspect that often gets overlooked is the film's visual storytelling. Rango doesn't rely solely on dialogue to tell its story. The images themselves carry an enormous narrative weight. The cinematography, the lighting, the color palette, all of these elements are deliberately employed to create mood and convey information. Scenes with the mayor, for instance, are often bathed in dark, muted tones, while scenes with Rango and Beans are brighter and warmer. This visual language works on a subconscious level and amplifies the film's emotional impact. The character designs warrant closer inspection, too. Unlike most animated films that aim to make their characters as adorable and marketable as possible, Rango takes a different path. The animals in this film look like actual animals, with all the imperfections that entails. Rango himself is a pretty ugly chameleon, with skinny arms, a long neck, and eyes that can point in different directions. The other characters are similarly unsightly, with crooked teeth, scars, and all sorts of details that make them feel genuinely real and lived in. This design choice might seem odd at first glance, but it contributes enormously to the film's credibility and immersion. You believe in these characters because they feel like real creatures, not products of a marketing committee brainstorm. The world of the film, the town of dirt and the surrounding desert, is crafted with a level of detail that's honestly hard to match. Every building, every prop, every background tells its own story. The town looks like it's seen better days, like it's slowly withering away, just like its inhabitants. The desert is simultaneously gorgeous and threatening, a place that promises life and death in the same breath. The animators clearly spent considerable time studying the real Mojave Desert, and their effort pays off handsomely. You can practically feel the heat, taste the dust, sense the loneliness. Now let's dig deeper into the specific plot threads and twists. But fair warning, spoilers ahead from this point on. The film opens, as mentioned, with Rango in his terrarium, living out his solitary existence as an amateur thespian. This opening scene is brilliant in its absurdity. Rango stages a one-man show with a dead cockroach as his co-star and a wind-up fish as his audience. He discusses character development, dramatic tension, and the necessity of conflict, a metatextual introduction that sets the tone for everything that follows. Then, the accident happens. The car transporting his terrarium swerves sharply, and Rango gets launched right onto the highway. What follows is one of the most memorable opening sequences in animated film history. Rango lands on the windshield of a convertible whose driver is an obvious nod to Hunter S. Thompson and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This brief cameo sets up the surreal elements that will thread through the rest of the film. Then Rango finds himself alone in the desert, confused, terrified, and completely unprepared for what's coming. His first encounter is with a roadkill armadillo named, wait for it, Roadkill, who tells him about the mysterious town of Dirt and advises him to follow the water. The desert crossing becomes an odyssey of self-discovery for Rango. He runs into various creatures that test him in different ways. There's the family of mariachi owls narrating his story while simultaneously prophesying his imminent demise. These owls pop up throughout the entire film, functioning as that Greek chorus I mentioned, commenting on the plot and dropping hints for the audience. They're also responsible for some of the film's funniest moments, especially when they try to immortalize Rango's heroic deeds in song, despite him not having actually done anything heroic yet. Rango also has a conversation with a scarecrow. He's really just talking to himself, of course, which underscores his loneliness and desperate need for connection. Then, there's the encounter with a massive hawk, the region's apex predator, who nearly kills him. These encounters prepare both Rango and the audience for the dangers awaiting him in Dirt. When Rango finally arrives in Dirt, he's greeted by a town teetering on the edge of collapse. Water is scarce, the residents are desperate, and nobody seems to know what's going on. The town bank, yes, they have a bank, even though the only currency is water, is nearly empty, and the inhabitants live in constant fear of bandits and the mysterious rattlesnake Jake. Into this powder keg stumbles Rango, completely clueless and entirely out of his depth. The scene where Rango first walks into the saloon is a masterclass in tension and comedy. He's a stranger, and every eye in the place is on him. The other animals, a colorful assortment of desert dwellers, size him up with suspicion. Rango, who spent his whole life playing parts, improvises a new identity on the fly. He claims to be a dangerous gunslinger who once killed 7 outlaws with a single bullet, the infamous Jenkins brothers. The story gets more outlandish the longer he talks, but everyone seems to buy it, or at least they want to buy it. This scene establishes a crucial theme: the power of stories and belief in myths. The people of Dirt are so starved for a hero that they're willing to accept even the most far-fetched tale if it gives them a shred of hope. And Rango, who's been searching his whole life for a role worth playing, finally finds his audience. It's a symbiotic relationship built on a lie, but with very real emotional consequences. Rango's first actual heroic deed in town is a total accident that launches his career as sheriff. The giant hawk that chased him through the desert shows up in town, and all the residents scatter in panic. Only Rango stays, not out of bravery, but because he's too bewildered to run. And through an absurd chain of coincidences, the hawk ends up dead. Rango, who basically did nothing but flail around in terror, gets hailed as a hero. The mayor, who clearly has his own agenda, immediately appoints him as the town's new sheriff. What follows is a phase where Rango tries to live up to his new role while also trying not to question it too deeply. He settles into the adoration, soaks up the attention, and starts believing his own hype. But there are also moments of self-reflection where he wonders whether he's really the man, or Chameleon, everyone thinks he is. These internal struggles make Rango a three-dimensional character who transcends the typical animated movie hero by miles. The relationship between Rango and Beans develops slowly but organically. She's skeptical of this stranger who appeared out of nowhere spouting wild tales. But she's also intrigued by him, maybe because she sees something of herself in him, another outsider fighting to find their place in a harsh world. Their interactions are often marked by sharp-witted verbal sparring, and there's a palpable chemistry between them that gradually evolves into genuine affection. The main conflict revolves around the vanishing water. The town bank, which houses the communal water reservoir, gets robbed. Rango, as sheriff, has to crack the case and bring the water back. His investigation leads him deep into a web of corruption and betrayal that reaches all the way to the highest levels of town government. Turns out the mayor himself is behind the water's disappearance. He diverted it to force residents into selling their properties so he could use the land for his own development project. This revelation is a turning point and draws parallels to real-world issues like land grabs, corruption, and resource control. The mayor isn't some simple cartoon villain. He's a realistic antagonist driven by greed and ambition. His methods are subtle and manipulative. He doesn't openly attack Rango but undermines him from within. It's a depiction of systemic corruption that feels disturbingly relevant. When Rango gets too close to the truth, the mayor plays his trump card, Rattlesnake Jake. Jake is everything Rango claims to be, a real killer, a feared gunslinger, someone who earned his reputation through actual deeds, not made-up stories. In one of the film's most intense scenes, Jake confronts Rango in front of the entire town and exposes him as a fraud. "You ain't a legend," Jake hisses. "You're just a lie." This scene is the emotional low point of the film. Rango is publicly humiliated, his fabrications laid bare, and the people, or animals, who trusted him turn their backs. It's a brutal depiction of shame and failure, and Johnny Depp's vocal work in this scene is genuinely heartbreaking. Rango flees the town, broken and desperate, convinced he can never be a real hero. What follows is the spiritual journey of the film. Rango wanders alone through the desert, searching for, he doesn't even know what. Maybe an answer to the question that's haunted him throughout the entire movie. Who am I? His wandering takes him through surreal landscapes and strange encounters until he finally has a vision of the spirit of the West. This scene is one of the film's most iconic moments and perhaps its most talked about. The spirit of the West is clearly meant to be Clint Eastwood, the quintessential figure of the Western genre, though he's never identified by name. He's an old man driving a golf cart through the desert with his Oscar trophies stashed in the back. He and Rango have a conversation about heroism, identity, and destiny that forms the philosophical core of the entire film. No man can walk out on his own story, the spirit tells him. That simple statement is the key to Rango's redemption. He can't run from who he is or what he's done. He can only decide how his story continues from here. And in that moment, Rango decides to become a real hero, not through lies or bravado, but through action. Rango returns to Dirt, this time with a plan and genuine resolve. He's figured out where the water was diverted, and he knows he has to bring it back to save the town. But first he has to face Rattlesnake Jake, the creature who humiliated him and nearly ended his life. This final confrontation is the film's climax, and it's staged masterfully. But here's where the film shows its true class. Rango doesn't beat Jake through brute strength or superior combat skills. Instead, he outsmarts him through cleverness and psychological maneuvering. He reveals the truth about the mayor, that he was using Jake as a tool and planned to dispose of him afterward, and turns Jake against his former employer. It's a victory of brains over brawn, which is pretty unconventional in a Western setting. The ending is both satisfying and emotional. The water is restored, the mayor is exposed and brought to justice, and Rango is recognized as a real hero, not for his fabricated stories, but for his genuine deeds. He stays in Dirt, takes his place as sheriff, and starts a relationship with Beans. The Mariachi Owls sing their closing number, and the film ends on a hopeful note. But this wouldn't be Rango if it were that simple. Even in the happy ending, there are hints of complexity. Jake, who was supposed to be the film's villain, isn't killed or imprisoned. He simply slithers away into the desert, possibly with a newfound respect for Rango, possibly just biding his time. Dirt's future remains uncertain, and the town's problems aren't solved overnight. But there's hope now, and that's more than they had before. The film's themes are diverse and operate on multiple levels. On the surface, it's a classic hero's journey. An unlikely protagonist gets thrown into an adventure, must pass various trials, and ultimately emerges as a changed and better person, or chameleon. But beneath that surface lie deeper layers of meaning. Identity is the most obvious and most discussed theme. Rango starts as someone with no identity, invents a false one, gets punished for it, and must ultimately discover his true self. The message isn't that you should never pretend to be someone else. The film acknowledges that we all play roles and that storytelling is a fundamental part of being human. The message is that genuine identity is forged through actions, not words. You become what you do. Community is equally central. Dirt is more than just a setting. It's a character in its own right, a community of outcasts and underdogs that holds together despite everything. Rango doesn't just save the water, he restores the community's faith in itself. He shows them they're more than just a dying town in the desert, that they have a future worth fighting for. Power and corruption are embodied by the mayor. He's a capitalist in the worst sense, someone willing to destroy an entire community to maximize his own profit. His control over the water is a metaphor for control over vital resources generally: oil, food, information. The film isn't making a heavy-handed political statement, but it definitely gets you thinking. The visual aspects have already been touched on, but they merit even deeper examination. The decision to make the characters intentionally ugly was a bold move for a mainstream animated film, but it pays off because it distinguishes the film from everything else and creates a visual identity that's unmistakable. You could recognize Rango from a fraction of a second of a single screenshot. That's a massive achievement in an oversaturated media landscape. The animation itself is of the highest caliber. Industrial Light and Magic, though known for live-action work, proved themselves a worthy contender in the animation space. Character movements are fluid and natural, facial expressions are subtle yet expressive, and the action sequences are breathtakingly choreographed. Particularly impressive is how the animators handle light and shadow. The lighting in Rango is more cinematic than in most live-action films. The cinematography, even though there's no physical camera, the term absolutely applies here, is equally remarkable. The film employs classic Western genre camera techniques, long establishing shots that capture the vastness of the landscape, tight close-ups of faces that build tension, and dynamic movement during action scenes. This technical sophistication helps Rango feel less like an animated movie and more like a genuine cinematic experience. The color palette is carefully chosen to establish mood and serve the narrative. Desert scenes are rendered in warm oranges and yellows that convey both beauty and danger. Night scenes come in deep blues and purples that suggest mystery and menace. Town scenes use muted, dusty tones that mirror the decay and despair of the community. This visual storytelling operates on a subconscious level, amplifying every scene's emotional weight. Hans Zimmer's score has been mentioned already, but its importance really can't be overstated. Zimmer created something that's both homage and innovation simultaneously. There are clear nods to Ennio Morricone's iconic Western music: the wailing guitars, the tension-building crescendos, the lonesome melodies. But there are also modern touches and unexpected detours that make the score entirely its own thing. The mariachi owl songs performed by Los Lobos deserve particular recognition. They add an extra layer of charm and humor that's hard to resist. The commercial performance was solid, even if it didn't quite reach the heights of a Pixar or Disney tentpole. The film grossed over $245 million worldwide against a budget of roughly $135 million, making for a healthy profit. But more important than the raw numbers was the critical reception. Rango earned near-universal praise from reviewers. Rotten Tomatoes shows an 88% rating, earning it a certified fresh designation. Metacritic, which weights reviews, gave the film a score of 75 out of 100, also very positive. Critics praised the originality, the visual splendor, the clever writing, and the outstanding voice performances. Many called it one of the year's best animated films and a worthy challenger to Pixar's dominance. The ultimate validation came at the 2012 Academy Awards, when Rango won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. This was a significant honor, especially given competition from Kung Fu Panda 2 and Puss in Boots. It was also a moment of recognition for Industrial Light and Magic and Gore Verbinski, proving they could deliver a world-class animated feature. The film's strengths are numerous and have been covered at length. The concept's originality, the animation quality, the character depth, the screenplay's intelligence, the voice work's brilliance, all contribute to making Rango what it is. But perhaps the greatest strength is the film's willingness to take risks. In an industry that often defaults to safe formulas, Rango dared to be different, and that boldness was rewarded. Of course, the film isn't without its weaknesses, though they're relatively minor compared to its strengths. Some critics pointed out that it runs a bit long. At 107 minutes, it's lengthier than most animated film. There are stretches, particularly in the second half, where the pacing dips slightly and certain scenes could have been trimmed. Additionally, the film is occasionally so packed with references and allusions that it can feel more like a film studies exercise than a standalone story. Another potential criticism involves accessibility for younger viewers. Rango isn't your standard kids' movie. It's darker, more complex, and sometimes more unsettling than most animated fare. Some of its themes, identity crisis, corruption, violence, might not be appropriate for very young children. That's not a criticism of the film itself, but parents should be aware before popping it on for their 5-year-old. Whether Rango is worth your time is a question that gets a resounding yes. It's a film that works on multiple levels, as an action-adventure for younger viewers, as a loving genre tribute for cinephiles, as a philosophical meditation on identity for those seeking deeper meaning. It's visually stunning, emotionally rewarding, and intellectually stimulating, a combination that's rare in the animation world. For Western fans, Rango is absolutely essential viewing. The film overflows with references and nods that genre enthusiasts will love, but it never gets so obscure that newcomers feel lost. It celebrates the genre while simultaneously deconstructing and subverting it. It's a love letter to the Western, wrapped in an animated film about talking animals, and somehow it works beautifully. For animation enthusiasts, it's equally indispensable. It showcases what the medium is capable of when helmed by talented artists with a clear creative vision. The technical quality is top-notch, but more importantly, the film uses that technique in service of a story and characters we actually care about. It's proof that animation isn't a limitation but an expansion of filmmaking's possibility. To wrap up this section, let me share some thoughts on the cultural significance of Rango. The film arrived at a fascinating moment in animation history. Pixar was ruling the industry with titles like Toy Story 3 and Up, which were both commercially and critically massive. DreamWorks was pumping out profitable but often less ambitious projects. And then Rango came along, an outsider that proved there's room beyond the mainstream for original, ambitious animated storytelling. Its success may not have triggered a revolution in the animation industry. There are still more safe sequels than daring originals. But it demonstrated that an audience exists for bold, unconventional work. It proved that you don't have to talk down to kids, that you can serve them complex stories and challenging themes without overwhelming them. And it showed that animation isn't just for children's entertainment, it's for whatever story needs telling. Rango is more than just a good film. It's a statement about the medium's potential and the value of originality in an industry that too often prizes safety over innovation. It's a film that deserves more movies like it, and one that will hopefully continue inspiring future generations of viewers. So if you've never had the chance to watch Rango, drop everything and give this film a shot. And if you've already seen it, watch it again. I promise you'll catch things you missed the first time around. Because Rango is a film that keeps giving, no matter how many times you revisit it. It proves that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the best ones, and that a scrawny, odd-looking chameleon with a gift for storytelling can save the world. Now let's push even deeper, because Rango has so many layers you could spend hours peeling them all back. Take the question of authenticity, which plays a central role throughout the film. Rango is a chameleon, an animal that adapts, that changes its color, that pretends to be something it's not. That's obviously a metaphor for his character, who spent his entire life performing roles and has no idea who he actually is. But it's also a statement about all of us, about the masks we wear and the parts we play in our everyday lives. The film raises the question, what makes someone authentic? Is it what you say or what you do? Is it the identity you assign yourself or the one others project onto you? Rango begins as a complete fabrication, but through his actions, through his decision to stand up for others despite his fear, he becomes something real. He becomes the hero he always pretended to be. That's a powerful message about the transformative power of action and the possibility of redefining yourself through your choices. Another fascinating dimension is how the film handles time and history. Dirt is clearly an anachronism, a classic Western town that seemingly belongs to the 19th century, but exists in a world with automobiles and golf courses. This temporal blurriness isn't just a visual gag. It speaks to how we blend myth and history, how we construct an idealized past that may never have existed in the first place. Dirt's residents live in a kind of time capsule, trapped in a world that modernity has long since passed by. They dress like cowboys, talk like cowboys, and live like cowboys, even though the era has moved on. Rango, arriving from the real world, is a messenger of that modernity, even if he himself doesn't know how to handle it. His presence disrupts Dirt's established order, but also brings the possibility of change. The film's treatment of water deserves special attention beyond what I've already discussed. Water isn't just a resource in Rango, it's a symbol of life, hope, and future. Every scene involving water, the weekly water dispensing ritual, the discovery of the underground river, the final flooding of the town, carries particular emotional intensity. The way Dirt's residents react to water, with an almost religious reverence, underscores its significance as the single most important element of their existence. The mayor's control over the water is more than a plot device. It's a statement about power and resources. Whoever controls the water controls everything. The mayor understands this and leverages that understanding to consolidate his authority. By artificially restricting the water supply, he creates a situation where residents must either submit to him or perish. It's a disturbingly realistic depiction of economic manipulation and a warning about what happens when essential resources become concentrated in the hands of a few. The film also grapples with the idea of the American West as both myth and reality. The West, as portrayed in classic westerns, is a land of limitless possibility, individual freedom, and heroic battles against evil. But that version of the West is largely a Hollywood invention, a romanticization of a much more complicated and often much grimmer history. Rango embraces this myth and dissects it, while simultaneously acknowledging its emotional potency. The encounter with the spirit of the West is the clearest expression of this tension between myth and reality. The figure is unmistakably Clint Eastwood, the iconic embodiment of the Western hero. But here he's rendered as a caricature of himself, an old man in a golf cart hauling his trophies around. He's simultaneously a tribute to and a deconstruction of the Western legend. And yet his words ring true and carry real weight. No man can walk out on his own story. It's a message about fate's inevitability, but also about the power to shape it. Another theme the film handles with surprising sophistication is what it means to be a hero. In traditional westerns, the hero is typically someone with superior skills, a fast draw, fearless fighter, somebody who defeats evil through raw physical dominance. Rango meets none of these criteria. He can't shoot, he can't fight, and at the mere mention of danger he panics. Yet he becomes the hero. Not despite his shortcomings, but because of them. Rango's heroism lies not in physical ability but in character. He's brave enough to return to dirt knowing what awaits him. He's clever enough to devise a plan that plays to his strengths and compensates for his weaknesses. And he's selfless enough to risk his life for others when he has every reason not to. That's a different kind of heroism, one rooted not in physical strength but in willpower and moral courage. The dynamic between Rango and Rattlesnake Jake adds another compelling layer. At first glance, they're polar opposites, the cowardly fraud and the terrifying killer. But they're also mirror images. Both are legends, both are feared, both define themselves through their stories. The difference is that Jake's stories are true, while Rango's are fabricated, at least initially. As the film progresses, that distinction blurs. Rango becomes a genuine hero, and Jake shows what might be grudging respect. By the end, it's ambiguous whether Jake was truly defeated or simply withdrew because he recognized a worthy adversary. This ambiguity is characteristic of a film that refuses to sort its conflicts into neat black and white categories. The supporting cast contributes significantly to the film's richness. Roadkill, the squashed armadillo, is a tragic figure, already dead, but his spirit still wandering, searching for the other side. His wisdom is hard-won through suffering, and his encounters with Rango produce some of the film's most philosophically interesting exchanges. The mariachi owls add yet another layer of reflection. They exist outside the narrative while constantly commenting on it. Their songs are simultaneously ironic and prophetic, lending the film an additional dimension of self-awareness. They seem to know their characters in a movie, that there are rules and expectations, and they play with those expectations in ways that are both comedic and thought-provoking. The smaller residents of Dirt, the paranoid arms dealer, the hard-drinking preacher, the stoic tracker, the mysterious lady, are similarly more than background decoration. Each possesses a distinct personality, backstory, and motivation. They're built on stereotypes but function as subversions of those stereotypes, characters who exceed their own archetypes. Technically speaking, Rango is an animation marvel. The level of detail is staggering. You can literally see every speck of dust, every scale, every hair. The movements are fluid and lifelike, partially due to the emotion capture technique that physically immerse the actors in their roles. Facial expressions are subtle and communicative. conveying emotions that go well beyond what you'd typically expect from animated characters. The lighting deserves repeated praise. In animation, light can be whatever the artist wants. There are no physical constraints. But the artists behind Rango opted for realistic lighting based on actual light physics. The result is a visual quality that feels more cinematic than most animated features. Desert sunlight casts harsh shadows, nighttime is deep and mysterious, and the transitions between day and night are breathtakingly gorgeous. The color work has been mentioned, but it warrants another look. The color choices aren't random. They're the product of careful deliberation about mood, symbolism, and narrative function. Warm desert oranges convey beauty and peril. Muted town browns speak of decay and hopelessness. The bright greens of water, when it appears, symbolize life and renewal. This visual language operates below conscious awareness, deepening every scene's emotional resonance. The sound design is equally first-rate. The sounds of the desert, wind, crunching sand, buzzing insects, are meticulously crafted, creating an immersive sonic landscape. Gunshots are loud and threatening, voices sound natural and alive, and the music integrates seamlessly into the overall tapestry. This is a film that's as rewarding to listen to as it is to watch. The voice cast beyond Depp merits special recognition. Isla brings Beans to life with a blend of strength and vulnerability. Ned Beatty makes the mayor unforgettable with his calm, unsettling delivery. Bill Nighy as Rattlesnake Jake is absolutely bone-chilling. And the supporting players, Alfred Molina, Harry Dean Stanton, Timothy Olyphant, all contribute to the film's rich texture. Gore deserves enormous credit for his vision and execution. Already known for Pirates of the Caribbean, Rango revealed a different side of his abilities. He showed he could direct not just big-budget spectacles, but also more intimate personal stories. His attention to detail is visible in every frame, and his willingness to take creative risks produced something genuinely one-of-a-kind. John Logan likewise earned every bit of praise for his screenplay. An Oscar-nominated writer with an impressive resume, Logan may have done his most personal work here. The script is simultaneously clever and heartfelt, packed with quotable dialogue and contemplative beats. It speaks to both children and adults without boring one or talking down to the other. The story behind the film's creation is interesting in its own right. The project started as an experimental concept where Verbinski wanted to explore what animation could do differently. He wanted to make a film that departed from everything that had come before. An animated film that felt like live action, a children's film that didn't shy away from complexity. It was ambitious, and he pulled it off. The emotion capture technique was groundbreaking. Rather than isolating actors in recording booths, the filmmakers gathered the entire ensemble on an improvised stage. Actors wore character-appropriate costumes, worked with makeshift props, and played scenes together in real time. Animators then used that footage as reference, resulting in animation that feels more spontaneous and organic than the industry standard. This approach explains why the dialogue in Rango sounds so vibrant and authentic. Lines weren't delivered in a vacuum. They emerged from genuine interactions between performers. The energy and chemistry from those sessions is palpable on screen. It's a testament to the power of collaboration and the benefits of thinking outside conventional production methods. The film took roughly 3 years to complete, which is relatively fast for animation. But the efficiency didn't come at the expense of quality, quite the opposite. The film is every bit as detailed and polished as productions that took considerably longer. That speaks volumes about the team's talent and dedication. When Rango finally hit theaters in 2011, critics and audiences alike embraced it. Reviews were overwhelmingly positive, with particular praise directed at the originality, visual quality, and character depth. Audiences followed through. The film earned over $245 million worldwide and established itself as a solid commercial success. But the real triumph came at the 2012 Oscars, when Rango took home the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. It was a well-deserved honor for a film that dared to be different and proved that originality and quality can still win the day. It was also a historic moment for ILM, marking their first win in that category. Since then, Rango has secured its place in animation history. It regularly appears on lists of the greatest animated films ever made, and it's cultivated a devoted fan base that appreciates its many virtues. Though no sequel has materialized, and there are good arguments that one isn't necessary, the film lives on in the memories of everyone who's experienced it. For me personally, Rango is more than a well-made movie. It's a benchmark for what animation can achieve. It demonstrates that the medium isn't confined to cute animals and family-friendly adventures. It shows that animation can be serious, complex, and artistically ambitious. It shows that children deserve better than what they're often served, and that adults can enjoy animated films without any sense of guilt or irony. So if you're looking for something that'll make you laugh and think at the same time, something visually stunning and emotionally satisfying, Rango is your pick. It rewards multiple viewings because it reveals new layers each time. It's proof that courage and originality can still thrive in an industry that too often plays it safe. Don't wait around. Grab your snacks, dim the lights, and let yourself get pulled into the world of Rango. You won't regret it. And if you're already a fan, go ahead and watch it again. I guarantee you'll spot something new, something you missed before. Because this film just keeps on giving. A small movie about a small chameleon with big dreams and an even bigger heart. Some movies come and go, but some stick with you forever. Rango belongs firmly in the second camp. It's a film that'll stand the test of time, one that'll still be relevant and entertaining 20 or 30 years from now. It's a classic of the genre and a testament to cinema's ability to move us, entertain us, and make us think. So until next time, and remember, no one can walk out on their own story. What you do defines who you are. And maybe, just maybe, there's a hero inside every one of us waiting to be discovered. Alright, but honestly, since we've already gone this deep, we might as well talk about a few things that tend to get swept under the rug whenever people discuss Rango. Because this film has even more going on than meets the eye, and it'd be almost criminal to just gloss over these elements. Let's start with something that genuinely resonates with me: how the film handles loneliness. Rango at the start of the film is about as isolated as a character can get. He lives in a glass box, carries on conversations with inanimate objects, and has zero meaningful social connections. That's not just sad, it's devastating when you actually sit with it. This little guy has spent his entire existence in a kind of solitary confinement that would be extreme even for a chameleon, an animal that's naturally pretty solitary to begin with. And then he gets thrust into a world where, for the first time ever, he can form real relationships, build genuine friendships, and experience authentic emotions. That's a transformative experience, and the film treats it with surprising sensitivity. What really impresses me is that the film doesn't portray this loneliness as something temporary that simply evaporates once Rango makes friends. No, the loneliness is part of him, a piece of his history that shaped who he is and that he has to reckon with. Even when he's surrounded by the townspeople of dirt, even when he's being celebrated as a hero, there are moments where you can see that old loneliness still flickering behind his eyes. That makes him a more believable character and gives the film an emotional depth you seldom encounter in animation. Speaking of emotional depth, let's talk about the relationship between Rango and Beans, because it's a real gem. In so many animated movies, the romance feels shoehorned in. Like someone said, "We need a love story, so just throw one in there." With Rango, it's different. The connection between Rango and Beans develops organically through shared experiences and genuine communication. They start as strangers who don't really trust each other, and by the end they're partners in every sense of the word. That kind of development takes time, and the film allows itself that time, even if it means other storylines occasionally take a back seat. Beans herself is a captivating character who doesn't get nearly enough attention in discussions about this film. She's not your typical female movie character who exists solely to motivate or reward the male hero. She has her own goals, her own struggles, her own motivations. Her ranch matters to her family matters to her, and she fights for what she loves with or without Rango by her side. That makes her a genuine partner for Rango, not just a love interest to check a box. And that quirky trait where she freezes up during intense emotions? That's not just a funny bit. It's a facet of her character that makes her vulnerable, something she has to work through. It's also a sharp metaphor for how all of us sometimes freeze up under stress, unable to respond when we need to most. Another element that rarely comes up in conversation is the soundtrack beyond Hans Zimmer's orchestral work. Don't get me wrong, Zimmer is phenomenal, but the mariachi owl songs deserve their own spotlight. These tracks, performed by Los Lobos, aren't just musical interludes. They're integral narrative components. They comment on the action, foreshadow what's coming, and give the film an extra dimension of Mexican cultural flavor and authenticity. The main song narrating Rango's journey is catchy and hilarious at the same time, with lyrics that operate on multiple levels. For kids, they're fun songs about a goofy cowboy. For adults, they're ironic commentary on heroism and destiny. Now let me go on a slight tangent about something genuinely cool. How the film uses different animal species to represent social structures and hierarchies. Dirt's population is a wild mix of desert creatures, iguanas, toads, tortoises, rodents, birds, and of course snakes. Each species seems to occupy its own rung on the social ladder, fulfilling a particular role. The toads are the working class, the rodents are the hustlers and crooks, the tortoise is the powerful politician. These aren't random assignments. It's a subtle depiction of class systems and power dynamics wrapped up in adorable animal shapes. Rattlesnake Jake as a rattlesnake is naturally the apex predator sitting at the top of the food chain, and his role as the mayor's enforcer makes perfect sense within that framework. What I also deeply appreciate is that the film isn't afraid to get genuinely serious. There are moments of real danger, real fear, and real sadness. The scene where Rattlesnake Jake humiliates Rango is brutal and painful to watch. Rango's walk through the desert after fleeing dirt has the quality of a dark night of the soul, and the realization that the mayor, this seemingly benevolent father figure, is actually the villain carries real emotional weight for the characters and for us as viewers. But the film also knows exactly when to release the pressure valve. After the most intense moments, there's always a joke, an absurd gag, or a beat of lightness that keeps things from becoming too heavy. That's an incredibly hard balance to maintain, and many films fail at it by leaning too far toward either solemnity or silliness. Rango manages this equilibrium with remarkable grace, and that's a huge part of what makes it work so well. Let me circle back to those supporting characters I mentioned earlier, because they truly deserve more of the spotlight. Take Doc, the town physician, an owl with a busted wing and a pragmatic outlook on life. Doc is one of those characters who seasons the film with deadpan humor, dropping observations that cut right to what everyone's thinking but nobody will say. He's also a symbol of the community's fragility, a doctor who can't fly in a town that's dying of thirst. Then there's Spoons, the grizzled prospector with a past he won't discuss. Spoons is one of those classic Western archetypes, the mysterious stranger with the heavy heart. But the film gives him enough individuality to keep him from being a mere cliché. His interactions with Rango produce some of the film's funniest exchanges, especially when Rango tries to act tough and Spoons deflates him with a single withering look. Waffles is another standout, a young, wide-eyed enthusiast who worships Rango as a hero from the jump. Waffles is the heart of the town, the optimist among the pessimists, and his unwavering loyalty to Rango serves as an important emotional anchor. When Rango returns at the end and truly earns the hero title, Waffles' reaction is one of the film's most genuinely touching moments. And of course, there are the Jenkins brothers, that gang of ground squirrel outlaws initially presented as a menace. What's interesting is how the film develops them over time. At first, they're just villains, dangerous and unpredictable. But the more we learn about them, the more we see them as desperate outsiders doing what they have to in order to survive. By the end, they've become Rango's allies, and this transformation feels earned because the film invested the time to establish them as multidimensional characters. One aspect I haven't touched on yet is how the film engages with the concept of belief. Not religious faith in the traditional sense, but belief in something larger, in myths and legends. The people of Dirt believe in the spirit of the West, this mystical figure representing justice and salvation. That belief gives them hope in their desperate situation, even though they don't know whether the spirit is even real. Then along comes Rango, inventing himself as a new hero, someone they can invest their faith in. The irony, naturally, is that this hero is a fabrication. But does that ultimately matter? The film seems to suggest that belief itself holds power, regardless of whether its object is real. This philosophical complexity is something I particularly value about Rango. The film asks questions without supplying easy answers. Is it morally acceptable to lie if the lie brings people hope? Is a hero who stumbles into heroism by accident any less heroic than one who set out to be one? What constitutes identity? What we say or what we do? These aren't simple questions, and the film treats them with the seriousness they deserve. Let's shift to something more technical: how the film blends different visual styles. Rango is obviously CG animated, but it has moments that almost resemble traditional animation, particularly in the surreal dream sequences. These sequences, where Rango navigates his fears and aspirations, have a different texture, a shifted color palette that distinguishes them from the rest of the film. That's a smart move because it signals to the viewer that we've entered a different register of reality. The dream sequence featuring the spirit of the West is especially noteworthy. The landscape turns surreal, almost abstract, with strange formations and unnatural colors. The spirit himself is rendered in hyper-realistic detail, almost uncannily so, creating a striking contrast with the other, more stylized characters. This visual differentiation reinforces the feeling that we're witnessing something extraordinary, a moment existing outside the film's normal reality. Another visual technique the film employs is the manipulation of perspective and scale. As small animals, the characters experience the world from a completely different vantage point than we humans do. An ordinary road becomes an endless desert. A water bottle becomes a massive reservoir. A car becomes a thundering behemoth. The film uses these shifts not just for visual comedy, but to immerse us in the characters' world, to show us what reality looks like through their eyes. The action sequences deserve another round of praise because they're genuinely spectacular. The big desert chase in the middle of the film, where Rango and his crew try to hijack the water transport, is a masterpiece of action staging. It evokes classic Western chase scenes, but with a wild twist. The characters ride bats and roadrunners instead of horses, and the train they're pursuing is an enormous water tank on wheels. The camera work is dynamic and thrilling. The editing is razor-sharp, and the music drives everything forward at exactly the right tempo. It's a scene you need to watch multiple times to absorb all the details. But it's not just the big set pieces that impress. The smaller moments of physical comedy are equally well executed. The way Rango moves, his clumsy attempts to look tough, his panicked reactions to threats, his theatrical posturing, all of it is perfectly animated and communicates character through movement alone. You can understand Rango's personality without hearing a single line of dialogue, just from how he walks, stands, and reacts. Here's something that might sound a little nerdy but genuinely fascinates me: the way the film plays with narrative perspective. Most of the time we follow Rango, seeing the world through his eyes, sharing his anxieties and hopes. But there are moments when the film shifts to a more objective viewpoint, particularly when the mariachi owls deliver their commentary. These owls exist outside the story while constantly engaging with it, and their observations subtly breach the fourth wall. This gives the film a metatextual dimension that separates it from the animated pack. There are also points where we adopt other characters' perspectives. We see Bean's frustration, the mayor's scheming, Jake's menace from multiple angles. This enriches the film's world because we're not limited to Rango's point of view. We understand how other characters experience the same events. It's a subtle technique, but it contributes enormously to making Dirt feel like a fully realized, inhabited place. One theme I haven't addressed yet is how the film handles gender roles. At a surface glance, you might think Rango is pretty conventional in this regard. We've got the male hero saving the town and getting the girl. But look closer and it's more nuanced than that. Rango is not a traditional masculine hero. He's weak, frightened, and insecure, traits often coded as unmanly in our culture. His greatest asset isn't physical strength or combat prowess, but empathy and creativity. That's a meaningful subversion of the traditional hero archetype. Beans similarly breaks the mold of the standard female film character. Yes, Rango ultimately helps save her, but that's not all there is to her. She fights for her ranch, stands her ground independently, and in many situations proves stronger and more competent than Rango. Her weakness, the freezing response, isn't a punishment for her strength, but a character trait that humanizes her. The film treats her with respect and gives her enough autonomy to be more than just the girl. Now let me touch on the cultural influences threaded throughout Rango, because there's a treasure trove to uncover. The most obvious influence is the classic Western, especially Sergio Leone's spaghetti Western. The sweeping landscape shots, the pre-battle tension, the laconic dialogue, all of it pulls directly from films like The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West. But the film transcends mere imitation, using these tropes as raw material for its own unique story. A less obvious influence is Chinatown, Roman Polanski's masterpiece about corruption and water scarcity in Los Angeles. The parallels are too pointed to be coincidental. Both stories center on water control as a power mechanism. Both feature a seemingly benevolent patriarch who turns out to be the villain, and in both cases the pursuit of truth leads the protagonist into increasingly dark territory, pun intended. Rango is essentially a kid-friendly Chinatown, which is a pretty wild concept in itself. Then there are the fear and loathing in Las Vegas references established in the film's opening minutes. The convertible with the wild-eyed driver, the desert landscape, the surreal vibe, all of it channels Hunter S. Thompson's classic Trip. It's a peculiar choice for a children's film, but it establishes the surreal undercurrent that runs through everything that follows. Johnny Depp, who of course played Thompson in the film adaptation, channels some of that same manic energy into Rango, particularly during moments where the character wrestles with his own sanity. There are also subtler nods that only hardcore cinephiles will catch. A certain camera angle recalls Apocalypse Now, another echoes High Noon. The cadence of particular dialogue lines evokes classic Hollywood exchanges from the 40s and 50s. These references never feel pushy or self-congratulatory. They're seasoning that adds extra flavor without overpowering the main dish. Something that continually amazes me is the film's willingness to slow down and let its atmosphere breathe. In an era where animated movies are often crammed wall-to-wall with gags and action beats, Rango takes its... There are moments of silence, moments where the camera simply lingers on a landscape or observes a character without anything dramatic happening. These quiet stretches are every bit as important as the loud ones, giving viewers space to process what they've seen and build an emotional connection with the characters. The decision not to produce the film in 3D was noteworthy too. In 2011, 3D was the hot trend in animation, and many studios were jumping on board to cash in on premium ticket prices. Verbinski opted out, believing 3D would distract from the story. It was a gutsy call that may have cost the film at the box office, but it reflects the director's commitment to artistic vision over commercial calculation. Let me also address something close to my heart: how the film treats the concept of failure. Rango fails. He fails spectacularly. He gets exposed as a liar, publicly humiliated, and loses everything he built. And that's okay. More than okay. It's necessary for his character arc. The film demonstrates that failure isn't the end. It's an opportunity for growth. Rango becomes a real hero not in spite of his failure, but because of it. He learns from his mistakes, accepts his flaws, and finds the courage to try again. That's a message particularly valuable for younger viewers. In a culture that often emphasizes perfection and instant success, it's refreshing to see a film that says, it's okay to fail. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to not be perfect. What counts is what you do next. Do you get back up? Do you try again? Do you learn from what went wrong? That's genuine heroism. Let's touch on something that might raise a few eyebrows: the depiction of violence. Rango doesn't pull many punches when it comes to action. There are gunfights, brawls, and characters who die or get seriously hurt. Everything's animated and nobody actually bleeds, but the tone gets pretty dark for a kids' movie at times. The giant hawk dies violently. Accidentally, sure, but still. Rattlesnake Jake poses a legitimate threat, and his confrontations with Rango are tense and genuinely frightening. Some parents might find this concerning, which is fair enough, but I'd argue the film handles violence responsibly. It's never glorified, never played for laughs, or presented as something cool. Consequences are shown. People are afraid, people get hurt, people die. And critically, Rango ultimately wins not through violence but through wit and persuasion. That strikes me as a more important lesson than sanitizing all conflict out of existence. One final point I want to raise is the ending and what it signifies. After all the adventures, after all the growth and all the trials, Rango stays in dirt. He could go back to his old world, try to find his way back to a terrarium somewhere. But he doesn't. He's found a new home, new friends, a new identity built on real actions rather than invented tales. The ending is hopeful without being naive. Dirt still has problems, the future's uncertain, but there's hope now where before there was only despair. That closing scene, where the mariachi owls sing their final number as they soar over the desert backdrop, is the perfect send-off. It's simultaneously an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of Rango's journey towards self-discovery and the start of his new life as Dirt's genuine protector. The music, the imagery, the mood, everything converges into an emotional crescendo that leaves you feeling good without feeling manipulated. When I think about everything Rango brings to the table, I'm consistently struck by the ambition and craft that went into making it. It's not just a good animated film, it's a good film, period. It would work as a live-action Western, which is itself a massive compliment. The fact that it was made as animation allowed the filmmakers to do things that would be impossible or prohibitively expensive in live action, but the medium was never used as an excuse for laziness or a lack of ambition. So what's left to say? Rango is a film that took the risk of being different and reaped the rewards. It's funny, it's smart, it's visually gorgeous, and it has a heart as vast as the desert it's set in. It treats its audience, regardless of age, with respect and intelligence. It poses questions without offering pat answers. It celebrates cinema while presenting its own singular vision. For me, Rango is one of those films I keep returning to. Every viewing reveals something new, something I'd previously overlooked. That's the mark of a truly great film. It never exhausts itself, it just keeps giving no matter how many times you come back. And I hope that after this deep dive into the world of Rango, those of you who haven't seen it feel compelled to give it a chance. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. Because at the end of the day, Rango is about more than a talking chameleon in the Wild West. It's a story about identity and authenticity, courage and fear, community and isolation. It's about what it means to be a hero, not the shining knight variety, but the kind of person who decides to do what's right even when they're terrified, even when the odds are stacked against them. And that, folks, is a story worth telling. So then, until we meet again, remember, we've all got a little bit of Rango inside us, that part searching for a stage, a role, a sense of self, and maybe, just maybe, the answer isn't in playing a part, but in doing the right thing even when nobody's watching. That's the real takeaway from Rango, delivered across 107 minutes of brilliant animation, razor-sharp dialogue, and jaw-dropping visuals. Hard to imagine a better way to spend your evening. And you know what? While we're at it, let me bring up something I've only briefly touched on, but that genuinely deserves a deeper look. The philosophical undertow running beneath all the dust and gunfire. Because Rango is fundamentally an existentialist work dressed up as a kid's movie, and that's pretty extraordinary when you sit with it. The entire film circles around questions of meaning and self-definition. Rango starts out as literally nobody, no name, no history, no connections to any other living thing. Philosophically speaking, he's a blank page, an empty vessel waiting to be filled with meaning. This echoes Jean-Paul Sartre's idea that existence precedes essence. We aren't born with a predetermined nature, but create ourselves through our decisions and actions. Rango literally reinvents himself when he reaches dirt, and the film interrogates whether that self-creation is legitimate even when it's founded on a lie. What's interesting is that the film doesn't offer a clean answer. On one hand, Rango gets punished for his deceptions. He's exposed, humiliated, driven out. On the other hand, his fabricated tales become the foundation for real hope among Dirt's residents. So was his lie wrong if it produced genuinely positive outcomes? That's a morally naughty question, and the film is wise enough not to oversimplify it. Instead, it shows that truth is messy, that good intentions don't automatically justify questionable actions, but that redemption remains possible through genuine deeds. While we're in philosophical territory, let me talk about the role of community in the film. Dirt isn't merely a backdrop. It functions as a character unto itself, a community of misfits and underdogs that perseveres despite everything. This cohesion is what keeps the town alive, not the water alone. Water matters, obviously, but without the community that shares and safeguards it, the resource would be meaningless. Rango enters this community as an outsider and gradually becomes part of it. That process of integration isn't smooth. He has to earn trust, prove himself, demonstrate that he's more than just some drifter passing through. And ultimately, when he reveals the truth about himself and still comes back to help, he shows that genuine belonging isn't about flawless credentials. It's about what you do for the people around you. That's a crucial message, especially in our current moment, when communities are fracturing and people feel more isolated than ever. Something else that grabs me is how the film approaches hero worship. Dirt's residents are so starved for a savior that they're ready to worship anyone who even vaguely resembles one. That's a fairly sharp critique of our collective tendency to create heroes and put them on pedestals without questioning whether they deserve the elevation. Rango becomes a hero not because he's particularly heroic, but because people need a hero and he happens to be in the right spot at the right moment. This dynamic reminds me of modern phenomena like celebrity culture or political personality cults. We all share this need for someone to believe in, and sometimes we project our hopes onto individuals who can't bear the weight of those projections. The film shows the danger of that dynamic, the crushing disappointment when the hero turns out to be a fraud, but also its capacity to drive real change when the hero decides to live up to the role. And then there's the mayor situation, which I find absolutely brilliant. The mayor is a classic wolf in sheep's clothing, but the film makes him more compelling than the cliché suggests. He's not evil for evil's sake. He operates from a philosophy, a worldview that justifies his behavior. He believes the strong have the right to rule. That power is its own justification. "We control the water, we control everything," he says at one point, and within his framework, that logic is airtight. What makes the mayor such an effective villain is that he never acts like one. He's cordial, paternal, seemingly generous. He even backs Rango, makes him sheriff, hands him authority and influence. But it's all calculated. He needs a scapegoat, someone the public can blame when things fall apart. Rango is his useful fool, at least in his estimation. It's a disturbingly authentic portrayal of political manipulation, tucked inside a movie about talking desert critters. The scene where the mayor reveals his true intentions is among the film's finest. Ned Beatty delivers a performance that's tranquil and threatening in equal measure, never once veering into theatrics. The mayor doesn't raise his voice, doesn't make explicit threats. He simply explains the situation as if laying out a business proposition. That composure makes him infinitely scarier than any ranting villain with exaggerated gestures. It's evil in its most banal and therefore most effective form. But here's something I also genuinely love about Rango. It's not perfect, and that's completely fine. There are moments that don't quite land, jokes that miss their mark, scenes that maybe run a touch too long. But these imperfections make the film feel more human, or should I say more chameleonic. They demonstrate that real art doesn't need to be flawless to be powerful. The slickness we've come to expect from computer-generated animation can sometimes feel sterile. Rango has enough rough edges to stay interesting. Consider the strange encounter with the roadkill armadillo early in the film. The scene is bizarre, faintly disturbing, and doesn't quite fit the rest of the movie's tone. But that's precisely why it works. It establishes from the jump that we're in a world where normal rules don't apply, where absurdity lurks around every corner. It's an opening salvo that announces, "Buckle up, this ride's going to get..." Now let me touch on something that often gets neglected in Rango discussions: the role of the environment and nature in the film. The desert isn't just scenery, it's a character with its own temperament and hazards. The punishing heat, the omnipresent dust, the vast emptiness. None of this is merely visual window dressing. It's narratively essential. The desert tests Rango, challenges him, forces him to exceed his own perceived limits. The way the film portrays the desert is simultaneously romantic and unflinching. There are those breathtaking sunset shots that could hang in a gallery, but there's also the harsh reality of dehydration and heat exposure. The desert is beautiful and deadly at once, a place that makes no compromises and forgives no weakness. That fits perfectly with the film's themes. In such an environment, you can't pretend to be someone you're not. The desert will strip away your pretensions sooner or later. The ecological message, the importance of water, the dangers of resource exploitation, remains relevant today, arguably more so than in 2011. At a time when water scarcity has become a serious crisis in many parts of the world, Rango's plot feels almost prophetic. The battle over water and dirt is a metaphor for larger struggles we face as a society, and the film addresses these concerns with more gravity than you'd expect from a children's movie. But the film never preaches. It doesn't lecture about environmental stewardship or resource management. It simply shows the consequences of greed and corruption, then trusts the audience to draw their own conclusions. That's a far more effective approach than overt moralizing. It treats viewers as smart enough to connect the dots themselves. Here's something I've never heard anyone discuss: the color symbolism in Rango. Sure, the colors are beautiful, but there's real meaning embedded in them. Take Rango's green skin. Green is traditionally the color of life and nature, but also of immaturity and envy. Rango is genuinely immature at the start of the film, unfinished, someone who hasn't yet become what he could be. Over the course of the story, he grows and evolves, and although his skin color stays the same, what it represents shifts fundamentally. The desert is rendered in warm oranges and golds, colors that simultaneously signal warmth and peril. Water, when it appears, glows in cool, life-giving blue. The mayor is frequently surrounded by shadow, his office draped in muted, ominous tones that hint at his concealed malice. Rattlesnake Jake brings a palette of darkness and menace wherever he slithers. This visual grammar works on the audience subconsciously, intensifying every scene's emotional charge. Speaking of Rattlesnake Jake, let me return to this phenomenal character one more time, because I don't think I've done him full justice. Jake is more than a villain. He's an embodiment of truth, as paradoxical as that sounds. He's the first one to see through Rango's lies, the first to voice the uncomfortable reality that everyone else wants to ignore. In a certain sense, Jake is more honest than Rango, at least in his self-presentation. He doesn't pretend to be anything he's not. He's a killer, and he owns it openly. That's why the final confrontation between them is so deeply satisfying. It's not simply a battle between good and evil. It's a clash between two different kinds of truth, two opposing philosophies. Jake believes in the power of fear and violence. Rango, by the end at least, believes in the power of community and courage. Rango's victory isn't physical. He doesn't overpower Jake in a fight. Instead, he persuades Jake to turn against the mayor by exposing the truth about the mayor's betrayal. It's a triumph of words over weapons, of intelligence over force. Something else that impresses me is how the film handles the concept of time. The narrative unfolds in a kind of temporal no man's land where elements from different eras coexist. There are classic 19th century Western elements alongside modern automobiles, plastic water bottles, and golf courses. This temporal ambiguity isn't an oversight. It's a deliberate choice that lends the film a fairy tale mythic quality. We're not situated in any specific historical period, but in a kind of archetypal West that synthesizes every version of the West into one. This timelessness also allows the film to blend various influences and references without worrying about historical consistency. One scene can look like a spaghetti western, the next like a 1940s film noir, and then suddenly there's a nod to a contemporary action blockbuster. This stylistic diversity keeps the film feeling fresh and surprising, even across multiple viewings. Something I think is massively underappreciated? The choreography of the crowd scenes. When the entire town is gathered, when all of Dirt's residents appear on screen simultaneously, it's a logistical tour de force. Every character has their own animation, their own subtle movements and reactions. There are no copies in the background, no recycled figures. The effort required must have been staggering, and it pays off because it makes the world feel genuinely populated and alive. How the crowd reacts to events is also remarkably nuanced. When Rango delivers one of his boastful proclamations, you can read the varied responses across the bystanders' faces. Some are impressed, some skeptical, some amused. These small details contribute enormously to the world's credibility and showcase the animators' dedication to their craft. Let me also discuss the film's structure, which is actually quite classical, but executed in compelling fashion. We've got the standard three-act framework: setup, confrontation, resolution. Act 1 introduces Rango, shows his arrival in Dirt and his elevation to sheriff. Act 2 has him grappling with the demands of his new role while uncovering the conspiracy behind the missing water. Act 3 forces him to confront his enemies and prove he's the hero he always claimed to be. But within that classical framework, there are surprises and deviations. The second act's low point, Rango's exposure and exile, hits particularly hard and comes relatively late in the film. That gives the movie a rhythm that differs from most animated fare and more closely resembles classic Western pacing. Redemption isn't simply handed over. It has to be earned through genuine self-reflection and authentic character development. The Spirit of the West scene, which I've referenced multiple times, functions structurally as a moment of clarity and decisive choice. It's the pivot point where Rango stops running from his responsibility and commits to becoming the hero he'd only been performing as. Moments of transformation like this are the heartbeat of any worthwhile hero's journey, and Rango treats this one with the weight it merits. I also appreciate the film's pacing. There are no dead spots, no stretches where nothing happens and the narrative stalls. But there's no rushing either, no sense that the film is hurtling from one scene to the next without pausing for breath. The tempo is calibrated just right, fast enough to maintain tension, measured enough to let the emotional beats land. The dialogue warrants one more salute. Screenwriter John Logan has an ear for language that's rare in this industry. The characters don't simply talk. Each has a distinct speech pattern, rhythm, and vocabulary. Rango is theatrical and over-the-top, Beans is blunt and practical, the mayor is smooth and manipulative, Jake is terse and threatening. These vocal distinctions make the characters more tangible and real. There are also those little dialogue gems you might miss on first viewing, but that become funnier each time around. Puns, allusions, clever asides, the film is brimming with them. My personal favorite is when someone asks Rango what he does for a living, and he responds, "I'm a protagonist." That's so meta, so self-aware, and it lands because the rest of the film sustains that level of cleverness throughout. Oh, and then there's the whole golf course angle. Running in the background of the plot is a story about urban development and the construction of a new golf course, the very thing the water has been diverted for. It's such an incisive critique of modern priorities, a luxury amenity for the wealthy while ordinary people are literally dying of thirst. It's commentary that never gets stated outright but hums beneath the surface, giving the film an additional layer of social awareness. You know what? I keep coming back to this movie in my head, and every time I do, I find another angle, another detail worth unpacking. That's the real magic of Rango. It's inexhaustible. It's one of those rare pieces of art that grows richer the more time you spend with it, rewarding patience and attention in equal measure. Whether you're 7 or 70, there's something in this film that speaks to you, something that resonates on a level you might not even be fully conscious of. And honestly, in a landscape littered with forgettable sequels and committee-designed franchises, Rango stands as proof that originality still has a place. That a scrappy, eccentric little film about a chameleon playing cowboy can compete with, and even surpass, the polished output of animation's biggest studios. That taking risks isn't just admirable, it's necessary. Because without films like Rango, the animation world would be a much duller, much safer, and much less interesting place. So yeah, go watch Rango. Watch it for the first time, watch it for the 10th time, watch it with your kids, watch it alone at 2 in the morning with a bowl of cereal. However you experience it, I promise you this, it'll leave a mark. The kind of mark that stays with you, that makes you think, that makes you laugh out loud at random moments days later when you suddenly remember that one line, that one look, that one absolutely bonkers action sequence. Because that's what great movies do. They don't just entertain you for a couple of hours and then evaporate. They move in, set up camp in your brain, and refuse to leave. Rango is one of those movies. And the world is better for having it. And speaking of things that set up camp in your brain, let me take us somewhere I haven't really explored yet, because there's this whole dimension of Rango that people just breeze right past, and it drives me a little crazy. I'm talking about the way this film handles the concept of performance itself. Not just Rango performing a role, which we've covered pretty thoroughly at this point, but the idea that literally everyone in this movie is performing something. Think about it. The mayor performs benevolence while secretly orchestrating the town's destruction. Beans performs toughness while hiding deep vulnerability underneath. The townspeople perform normalcy while their world is literally crumbling around them. Even Rattlesnake Jake performs invincibility, though the film hints that beneath all that menace there might be something more complex lurking. Maybe not quite fear, but an awareness that his power depends on the system the mayor built, a system that could discard him just as easily as it uses him. Everyone in Dirt is wearing a mask of some kind, and Rango's particular genius, and his particular tragedy, is that he's the only one honest enough to admit he's faking it. Well, eventually honest enough anyway. This idea that society runs on collective performance is actually pretty radical for any movie, let alone one marketed to families. We all agree to play our parts, the leader, the follower, the rebel, the peacekeeper, and as long as everyone keeps up the act, things hold together. But the moment someone drops the facade, the whole structure starts to wobble. That's exactly what happens when Jake outs Rango. It's not just Rango's personal humiliation. It's a crack in the social fabric of the entire town. If the sheriff is a fraud, what else might be fake? The bank? The government? The promise that things will get better? Suddenly everything is up for grabs, and that existential vertigo is way more unsettling than any rattlesnake with a gatling gun tail. And this connects to something I find really clever about the film's structure, the way it uses the Western genre itself as a kind of performance. The Western is arguably the most mythologized genre in American cinema. It's built on legends, on larger-than-life figures, on stories that have been told and retold until the line between history and fiction has completely dissolved. Rango understands this implicitly. The entire town of Dirt feels like it's performing Being a Western Town, complete with saloon, sheriff's office, and dusty Main Street. The characters feel like they're performing Being Western characters. And Rango, the ultimate performer, fits right in, because in a world built on performance, the best actor wins. But here's the kicker, and this is where the film gets genuinely profound, I think. It suggests that performance isn't necessarily a bad thing. Yes, Rango's lies cause harm. Yes, the mayor's performance of goodness masks genuine evil. But the townspeople's performance of community, of hope, of resilience, that performance is what keeps them alive. Sometimes the act of pretending to be brave is indistinguishable from actually being brave. Sometimes performing hope is the first step toward actually feeling. The film doesn't draw a simple line between authenticity and deception. It acknowledges that human experience exists in the messy space between the two. Now, I want to pivot to something that's been nagging at me this whole time: the way the film uses space. And I don't mean outer space, I mean physical, geographical space. The vastness of the desert in Rango isn't just pretty scenery. It's a narrative tool. The emptiness surrounding Dirt reinforces the town's isolation, its vulnerability, its smallness in the face of an indifferent universe. When Rango walks out into that desert after his disgrace, the camera pulls back to show just how tiny he is against that enormous landscape. And it's one of the most visually striking images in the entire film. He's a speck, a nothing, a nobody, which is exactly how he feels in that moment. But the desert also represents possibility. It's empty, yes, but that emptiness means it can be filled with anything. Rango crosses the desert twice, once as a lost, confused nobody, and once as someone who's made a choice about who he wants to be. Same desert, same emptiness, completely different meaning. That's elegant storytelling, using the environment to mirror internal character states without ever spelling it out for the audience. The architecture of dirt itself tells a story too, if you're paying attention. The buildings are cobbled together from human refuse. Bottle caps, tin cans, matchboxes. It's a recycled world, a civilization built from someone else's garbage. There's something both resourceful and tragic about that. These creatures have built an entire society from things humans threw away, which is a pretty pointed commentary on waste and disposability if you choose to read it that way. But it's also a testament to resilience, to the ability to create something meaningful from whatever you've got, even if what you've got is literal trash. The water tower at the center of town is another brilliant piece of visual storytelling. It looms over everything, a constant reminder of what the town needs most and has the least of. When the bank vault, really just a giant water cooler jug, is revealed to be empty, it's filmed like a crime scene, with all the gravity and dread you'd expect from a murder mystery. Because in dirt, losing the water is murder. It's a death sentence for the entire community. The way the film treats water as sacred, almost holy, gives every scene involving it an extra charge of meaning. Let me also talk about something that I think contributes to the film's rewatchability in a huge way: the background details. Rango is one of those movies where the backgrounds are absolutely loaded with jokes, references, and world-building details that you simply cannot catch on a single viewing. Signs on buildings, graffiti on walls, objects on shelves, every frame is packed with stuff to discover. It's the kind of obsessive detail work that makes you feel like the filmmakers cared about every pixel, and it rewards the kind of viewer who likes to pause and examine every corner of the screen. There's a shot early in the film, for instance, where Rango passes a building in dirt that has a sign reading something absurd. I won't spoil it because discovering these things yourself is half the fun. But it's the kind of throwaway gag that most viewers will never notice, and yet someone clearly spent hours designing and animating. That level of dedication is rare and precious, and it's one of the things that elevates Rango from a very good film to a genuinely great one. Something else I want to explore is the way the film handles exposition. One of the hardest things in any movie is conveying necessary information to the audience without it feeling forced or clunky. Rango manages this beautifully, largely through character interaction and visual storytelling rather than through awkward info dumps. We learn about the water crisis not through someone explaining it in a speech, but through seeing how the townspeople react to their dwindling supply, the rationing, the desperation, the quiet resignation. We learn about the mayor's corruption not through a convenient villain monologue, but through subtle clues scattered throughout the film that only come together in retrospect. This approach trusts the audience to be active participants rather than passive consumers. It says, "Pay attention, because we're not going to hold your hand." And that trust is part of what makes the viewing experience so rewarding. When you finally piece together what the mayor has been doing, there's a genuine aha moment that feels earned, not handed to you on a silver platter. The film's treatment of death is another area worth exploring. Death is a constant presence in Rango, which is unusual for a family film. The mariachi owls literally prophesy Rango's death in their opening song. Characters die on screen. The hawk's death is violent and sudden. Roadkill is introduced as a character who is already dead, or at least mostly dead, existing in some liminal space between life and whatever comes next. And the threat of death, from dehydration, from Jake, from the desert itself, hangs over the entire narrative like a vulture circling overhead. But the film doesn't treat death as something to be feared and avoided at all costs. Instead, it presents death as part of life, as something that gives meaning to our choices precisely because our time is limited. Rango's heroism matters because it could cost him his life. The stakes are real because the consequences are permanent. By acknowledging death openly, the film actually heightens everything else. The humor is funnier because it exists against a backdrop of danger. The friendships are more precious because they could be lost, and the victory is more satisfying because it was genuinely at risk. This might sound heavy for a kid's movie, and maybe it is, but I think kids handle these themes better than adults give them credit for. Children understand danger and mortality on an intuitive level. They don't need to be shielded from it. They need to see characters who face it with courage and grace. Rango provides exactly that kind of model. And while we're on the subject of things this film does that most animated movies wouldn't dare attempt, can we talk about the pacing of that third act? Because most animated films rush their endings. The hero realizes what they need to do. There's a quick final battle. Everything wraps up neatly in about 10 minutes. Roll credits. Rango doesn't do that. The third act takes its time. Rango's desert wandering, his encounter with the spirit of the West, his return to dirt, the confrontation with Jake and the mayor, all of this unfolds at a deliberate pace that gives every beat room to breathe. There's a moment after Rango's vision quest, as he's walking back toward dirt, where the film just lets him walk. No dialogue, no dramatic score, just a chameleon putting one foot in front of the other across an endless desert. It's a quiet, contemplative moment in a film that could easily have skipped over it in favor of more action. But Verbinski understood that this silence was necessary, that the audience needed to sit with Rango's decision before seeing its consequences. It's the kind of restraint that separates good filmmakers from great ones. I also want to circle back to the humor one more time, because I realize I haven't given specific examples that really showcase the film's comedic range. There's a moment early on where Rango is trying to blend into the bar and he orders a glass of water. In a desert town, where water is the most precious commodity imaginable. The bartender's reaction, this long, incredulous stare, is comedy gold, and it works entirely without dialogue. Then there's Rango's increasingly elaborate lie about killing the Jenkins brothers, which spirals into such absurd territory that you can practically see the other characters' bullshit detectors going haywire. But they're too desperate for a hero to call him out. One of my favorite running gags involves the town's one-armed clock tower, which rings at inappropriate moments throughout the film. It's the kind of background detail that you barely notice at first but becomes funnier each time it recurs. There's also a wonderful bit where Rango tries to organize a posse and nobody knows what that means, leading to a genuinely hilarious exchange about the word itself. These small moments of comedy are what give the film its texture and personality, distinguishing it from movies that rely on a handful of big jokes surrounded by filler. The physical comedy deserves recognition too. There's a sequence where Rango is trying to act casual while being chased by the hawk through the town, and his body language, the forced nonchalance, the barely concealed panic, is animated with such precision that you can read every emotion playing across his face simultaneously. It's the animated equivalent of a Buster Keaton routine, where the humor comes not from what happens but from how the character reacts to what happens. I should also mention the film's sound design in more detail because it's genuinely exceptional. The Foley work, the sound effects created in post-production, adds an incredible layer of texture to every scene. You can hear the creak of leather, the clink of spurs, the whistle of wind through empty buildings. These aren't generic Western sounds pulled from a stock library. They feel specific to this world, crafted to enhance the reality of dirt and its inhabitants. When Jake slithers across the ground, you can hear every scale scraping against every grain of sand. When the wind picks up, you can almost feel it on your skin. This attention to sonic detail is something most viewers probably don't consciously notice, but it contributes enormously to the film's immersive quality. The musical choices beyond Zimmer's score are also worth highlighting. There are moments where the film uses silence more effectively than any score could. When Rango first steps out into the desert after leaving his terrarium, the soundtrack drops to almost nothing, just the hum of heat and the distant call of a bird. That silence is deafening in its own way, communicating Rango's vulnerability more powerfully than any orchestral swell could. And then there are the diegetic sounds, the music that exists within the world of the film itself. The mariachi owls don't just comment from outside the narrative, they're actually present in the world, playing their instruments and singing their songs on screen. This blurring of diegetic and non-diegetic music is a sophisticated technique that reinforces the film's metatextual playfulness. The owls are simultaneously in the story and outside it, performers and commentators, participants and observers. It's a delicious paradox that the film never tries to resolve, because resolving it would diminish its charm. Let me shift gears and talk about something that fascinates me from a storytelling perspective: the way the film uses the concept of water as a narrative device beyond its obvious symbolic significance. Water in Rango functions almost like a MacGuffin. It's the thing everyone is searching for, the thing that drives the plot forward. But unlike a traditional MacGuffin, water in this film actually matters. It's not just a plot device, it's literally the difference between life and death. The audience cares about the water not because the screenplay tells us to, but because we can see its absence destroying the community we've come to care about. The rationing scenes are particularly effective. Watching the townspeople line up for their weekly allotment of water, seeing the desperation in their eyes, the way they cup their hands around their tiny portions as if holding liquid gold. These scenes hit harder than any action sequence because they're grounded in a very human fear. We all know what it feels like to need something desperately, and the film taps into that universal experience with precision and empathy. When the water finally returns at the film's climax, when the pipeline is reopened and water floods into the town square, the reaction of the townspeople is genuinely moving. They don't cheer or celebrate immediately, they just stand there, stunned, watching the water flow. Some of them cry, some of them laugh, some of them fall to their knees. It's filmed with the reverence of a religious experience, and honestly, for these characters, that's exactly what it is. After everything they've been through, the sight of water is nothing short of miraculous. This emotional payoff works because the film earned it. We spent enough time with these characters, saw enough of their suffering, understood enough of what water means to them, that when it finally arrives, we feel it too. That's the power of good storytelling, making the audience feel what the characters feel, not through manipulation, but through genuine connection. Another thing I keep coming back to is how the film treats its villain's defeat. In most animated movies, honestly, in most movies period, the villain gets a dramatic comeuppance. They fall off a cliff, they get eaten by their own creation, they somehow ironically destroy themselves. It's satisfying in a momentary cathartic way, but it's also predictable and often cartoonishly simplistic. Rango doesn't do this with the mayor. He doesn't die dramatically. He doesn't escape to fight another day. He's simply exposed, arrested, and presumably will face some form of justice. It's anticlimactic in the best possible way, because real-world corruption doesn't end in dramatic explosions. It ends in courtrooms and consequences. Jake's handling of the mayor in those final moments is particularly telling. Jake doesn't kill him on Rango's behalf or as some act of righteousness. He simply removes a corrupt partner who tried to double-cross him. It's a pragmatic, self-interested act that happens to align with justice, which feels way more honest than any noble sacrifice narrative. Jake remains who he is, a dangerous predator operating by his own code. And the film respects him enough not to sanitize him into an unlikely ally with a heart of gold. You know what just occurred to me? I haven't really talked about the significance of Rango choosing his own name. This is actually a huge character moment that's easy to overlook. Before arriving in Dirt, our protagonist has no name at all. He's a creature without a label, without a linguistic identity. When he's put on the spot in the saloon and has to introduce himself, he glances at a bottle of some kind, I believe it's a brand label, and improvises Rango. It's a name born from desperation and accident, plucked from the environment rather than given with intention. But here's what's profound about it. By the end of the film, that accidental name has become real. It's been filled with meaning through deeds and sacrifice and growth. Rango is no longer just a random word pulled off a bottle. It's the name of the hero who saved Dirt. The name started as nothing and became everything, just like the character who bears it. That's a beautiful parallel, and I don't think it gets enough credit in analyses of the film. This extends to the broader question of how names function in the film. Dirt is a name that reflects how the town sees itself: worthless, insignificant, easily overlooked. Beans is straightforward and unromantic, reflecting the character's practical nature. Rattlesnake Jake is exactly what it sounds like. No frills, no pretension, just a statement of what you're dealing with. Each name in the film carries weight and meaning. and together they create a linguistic landscape that complements the visual one. Let me also revisit the Spirit of the West scene one final time, because there's an element I haven't addressed. When Rango encounters this figure, the spirit doesn't give him a pep talk or hand him a magic weapon or tell him exactly what to do. He simply asks Rango a question and makes an observation. The question is essentially, what are you going to do about it? And the observation is that you can't walk out on your own story. That's it. No grand wisdom, no mystical revelation, just a simple challenge and a simple truth. What makes this so effective is its restraint. The spirit respects Rango enough not to rescue him. He doesn't solve Rango's problem. He just points Rango back toward the problem and trusts him to figure it out. That's actually a really mature representation of mentorship. The best mentors don't give you answers. They help you find the courage to seek your own. And Rango, bless his scrawny green heart, rises to that challenge. He goes back. He faces his fears. He does the thing. I think there's also something worth saying about the film's relationship to its own medium. Rango is aware that it's an animated film, but it never treats that as a limitation. It never winks at the audience with a, "Hey, we're just a cartoon" attitude. Instead, it uses animation as an expansion of possibility, a way to create images and sequences that live action simply couldn't achieve with the same impact. The surreal dream sequences, the impossible camera angles during the chase scenes, the expressiveness of the character animation, all of these take full advantage of what the medium offers while maintaining the emotional seriousness of live-action filmmaking. This dual nature, technically animated but emotionally live, is part of what makes Rango so special. It proved that animation isn't inherently less than live action, that it can be just as complex, just as nuanced, just as artistically ambitious. And it did so without making a big deal about it, without turning itself into a manifesto or a mission statement. It just told its story, and the quality of that storytelling spoke for itself. You know, the more I think about this movie, the more I realize that its greatest achievement might be something I haven't explicitly named yet. Its ability to make you care about a bunch of digital desert animals as if they were real people with real problems. By the end of the film, Dirt doesn't feel like a fictional town populated by animated reptiles and rodents. It feels like a real community, with real stakes, inhabited by individuals you genuinely root for. That kind of emotional investment is incredibly hard to manufacture, and Rango makes it look effortless. When Rango walks back into Dirt for the final showdown, you're not thinking, "Oh, I hope this cartoon chameleon saves the day." You're thinking, "Come on, Rango, you can do this." You're invested. You're worried. You're rooting for a green lizard with bad posture and a Hawaiian shirt like your life depends on it. And when he pulls it off, when he turns the tables on Jake and the mayor through sheer wit and determination, the relief and satisfaction you feel are real emotions, not simulated ones. That is the ultimate mark of a great film. Not the technical prowess, not the clever references, not the beautiful animation, though all of those matter. It's the ability to make you feel something genuine for people who don't exist, in a place that isn't real, facing problems that were invented by a screenwriter. Rango does all of that, and it does it while making you laugh, making you think, and making you want to immediately watch it again the moment the credits roll. So look, I could probably keep going for another 3 hours dissecting every frame and every line of dialogue in this film. But at some point, you've just got to sit down and experience it for yourself. No amount of analysis can substitute for the actual viewing experience. The surprise of discovering the humor, the thrill of the action, the quiet satisfaction of watching a character find out who they really are. All I can do is tell you it's worth your time and trust that the film will do the rest. And if you take nothing else away from this entire conversation, take this. Rango is proof that the weirdest ideas, when executed with passion and skill and genuine heart, can become something extraordinary. A movie about a pet chameleon pretending to be a cowboy in a town full of ugly desert animals shouldn't work. On paper, it's ridiculous. But on screen, it's magic. And that gap between the absurdity of the concept and the brilliance of the execution, that's where the real art lives. That's where Rango lives. And honestly, that's a pretty great place to be. It's worth your time and trust that the film will do the rest. And if you take nothing else away from this entire conversation, take this. Rango is proof that the weirdest ideas, when executed with passion and skill and genuine heart, can become something extraordinary. A movie about a pet chameleon pretending to be a cowboy in a town full of ugly desert animals shouldn't work. On paper, it's ridiculous. But on screen, it's magic. And that gap between the absurdity of the concept and the brilliance of the execution, that's where the real art lives. That's where Rango lives. And honestly, that's a pretty great place to be.